So our first speaker is Joe. He's head of ALT services at Godalming College. And he described to me the biggest challenge for a sixth form college like Godalming is the size. As well as the data protection officer, he's also the MIS manager. Manager of a team of yourself, I think, or is it you got one? Yeah. Okay, so he manages himself, a bit like me in GDPR. And he's responsible also for the software developers and the IT team as well. So not very much he's covering there then, and also he's doing GDPR. So his paper's on practical applications of GDPR for further education. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just green to move on.
Cool. Wow, thank you. I'm aghast. I don't get to do this very often. I'm usually in an office writing SQL queries or answering the phone. So I'm going to break my own rule, which is never apologise before a presentation. But I will. So Godalming College. I'm not quite. Could I just have a brief show of hands? How many people are here from a sixth form college? I know there's one. Oh, excellent, cool. We're in the club. FE and general FE, higher education, and any other. Right. Excellent. Cool. It gives me a clue. So it sounds like we kind of know what a sixth form is, which is handy. We are a sixth form college. We're in southwest Surrey. Our MP is Jeremy Hunt. I don't know why I mentioned that, but I thought it relevant. We have round about 2,100 students. The official number varies depending on which day the principal asks me how many students we have. We also have around 50 students who are 14 to 16 who are coming to us. They belong to a local school or a small number of schools, and they come to us for lessons in a different environment to try and help them to succeed in something that's a little bit less like GCSEs. Our turnover is about £9 million, 250 staff. But the key thing for us, the interesting thing, which is you'll see appearing in the theme of some of my points here, is that we do have an in-house MIS, and a lot of our systems have been built to be online and centralised already, which on the one hand is quite mad for a college the size of us and a team that's our size, but actually has helped us quite a lot in something which we've just heard, which is about data protection by design. We do data protection by design because it's cheaper. And the other interesting thing, which bears no relation to this at all, but I thought I'd tell you anyway, is that we're in the process of converting to a single academy trust so that we can save some VAT. So this is me. This is my data protection face. I've worked at Farnham College from 2001. I've been at Godalming College since 2005. And in all of that time, I've been responsible for IT, MIS, and everything that goes with that. So that's SQL reporting software. The ILR is my baby. In fact, I stayed up late last night to make sure the ILR was in for deadline, which is today, R04, if anyone's interested. I am also the data protection officer. And I never knew that data protection officers didn't exist I just assumed everyone had a data protection officer. But as part of our local sixth form group, we discovered that there are some sixth form colleges which don't have a data protection officer, which I think is quite scary. Anyway, the other interesting thing in relation to this topic is that we did have a data security breach in 2001, which made it to The Guardian, made it to the BBC. According to the Daily Mail, it was because of immigrants, but anyway. The other interesting thing is, in common with a lot of smaller institutions, the opportunity for training and development and indeed qualifications in this area is actually quite limited. So if at any point you hear me say something which is factually incorrect, you disagree with, talk to me afterwards, because it probably is wrong. Oh, yes, and just so that you know, I'm a data protection officer for this much of the time, and the rest of the time I am actually quite interesting. I guess this is why we're here, really. We're in FE. Well, obviously, some of you aren't, but we are. What do I start? The first thing is to do everything that we've heard already. I don't think this is complicated. From an FE point of view, it's dead simple. We're used to reading specifications, we're used to reading rules, we're in an environment where people provide sets of rules to do stuff. There's an absolutely amazing resource of people at GISC have been great to us. and indeed there are some legends from GIST coming on later. All hail Andrew. So do just use the expertise that's around. I think that's the simplest thing. And I know this is really obvious, but work out in the context of this big, huge, scary thing. Work out where you are. If you don't know where you are, how are you going to know where to go? It's a bit like Google Maps, really. It doesn't work without sat nav. And there's another interesting thing which I would recommend, which is to read the data protection bill, which I realise the DUP haven't authorised yet, but it is here and it is available. But actually, I found that I don't know why I brought these props because you can't see what they are, but I can. This is the EU directive from the European Commission, and this is really, really easy to read and includes all sorts of useful things, such as sovereign states can decide different things here, which I know is counter to popular culture at the minute, but it's true. So you'll find in the regulations from the EU, the European Commission, the bits that aren't in there that you have to find out somewhere else. And I'll cover a little bit of that later on. And of course, the obvious thing here is work out where you need to be, and that's pretty obvious. Oh yes, and if you're in any doubt and you're having any problem at all recruiting a data protection officer, getting training, getting time in the pub, just have a data security breach. It'll bring to the eyes of your management team and for us, it's our governors, the fact that this is actually quite serious. Do I need to rehearse this? We've just seen it before. Not really. I think the only difference really from a college point of view that's any different to what we've heard already is that our data subjects tend to be students. Our data subjects tend, because, well, in terms of how much data we hold about them, they tend to be living persons. Sometimes difficult to believe on a Monday morning, but anyway. But they're the year that they're with us, or the 2 years in most cases, those students have got a lot of access to all of the information in terms of a data subject access request. And it's dead easy from an IT point of view to make it possible for a student to download all of their information. I think ours is going to be in an XML format because that means that they can load it in a spreadsheet or they can transfer it to somewhere else. That's a dead easy thing to do, technically. What's a little bit less easy to do is to deal with students who were here 5 years ago, and indeed there are some question marks there about keeping information up to date. We need to keep the information because we could be audited, and for those of you who don't know how FE works, a huge, massive bundle of data gets sent to the Department for Education, and the Department for Education gives us money every year. The link into that is that we can be audited back on that information, and it has to be right at the point that we submitted it, not necessarily, and that's a difficult thing to reconcile when you've got students who change information subsequent to that, and indeed the technical challenge of supporting authenticated access to that information if that's the way you choose to do it. I'm hoping that my programming guys are going to come up with a natty solution, because they usually do. But that's something we're thinking about. And originally, number 8, children. This slide, just before I sent it off to GISC, said, do you have any? And I thought that might be seen as a bit of an invitation. So an interesting thing about the data protection bill as it stands is that I think, is it right in the age 13 was currently listed as being the UK, the ICO's accepted age at which young people are deemed capable of signing a contract for themselves in relation to this. So that's an interesting thing. If we were dealing with any students that were any younger, would they be able to, for example, sign their own privacy notices? And that's something I'll touch on a little bit later as well. The other thing that's interesting from a sixth form point of view is the data protection by design. And that's because everything that we do as a sixth form college revolves around trying to have as much of a handle on students on a second-by-second basis as to how they're doing, how we're communicating with their parents, are they attending, what the grades are they getting, how do they do in their homework, and all these kind of things. And that's all data that's held centrally because it's useful to be held centrally and accessible by the people that need to see it. A similar thing would be with for young people who have needs which would fall into the sensitive personal information, such as learning support needs or have a medical something where that information needs to be known by people who need to know it, but not by others. And so you kind of find yourself building these systems to be fairly compliant, I think, from the start. So anyway, that's the FE perspective. And of course, the good thing for us is that we've got no international students, but if you did, or indeed had an external hub in some other far-off land, like one of our local schools has, then you might want to be thinking about who holds that data, where is it, and which regulatory authority handles that. We're sitting, waiting, hoping our competitor, sorry, our neighbour college works that one out before the ICO does. Right. So this is a good thing for FE, is most of the activity that we engage in is regulated. We're working under a contract from the Department for Education and all its subsidiary acronyms. We have to have that data. We can't have a student can't come to our college unless they provide us with a set of information, and that set of information is limited to those things that we need to know, because quite frankly we can't afford the storage space for things that we don't. And therefore, it's a condition of a student arriving at college that they provide us that information and that we are able to process it for the period of time that we tell them that we're going to process it. So that's quite easy, really. There isn't really a consent issue there, but I'll come back to that as well. We engage in very little automated processing, which is quite a feature of the directive from the EU, which again separates us out from some of the commercial world. It separates us out from things such as the insurance companies, which I know is specifically mentioned in the bill. All of our decisions are made human being and are documented, and so would form part of a subject access request, should that be made. And you might have seen in the press that there is in fact, probably not too far from here, a sixth form in a school refused to readmit a number of students into the second year of their A-levels because they hadn't performed well enough in their AS results, and unfortunately hadn't put it into their policy properly. So they made effectively, the example I make to our senior management team, whether or not this is correct, feel free to correct me, is that there was some automated processing about whether a student could do something which wasn't in their policy. What else? Oh yes, the lower gauge for limit of consent, that works for us. That means that we can deal with students, not their parents, although therein lies yet another interesting thing. We'll discuss that one in the pub later. But the main thing is that we collect information for specific purposes, and it's about providing education. We don't engage in any marketing activity based on the information that's been provided by students, or indeed their parents, or by staff. So it's... what am I saying? I'm saying it's easy. I'll regret that one. And like I said before, the sorts of things that make data protection, the GDPR implementation easier are the sorts of things we would want to do anyway, because it's in our interests and it's in the interests of our main data subjects, which are students. And despite what I said at the start, there is expertise. Every FE college, every sixth form college, probably less so in schools, but I don't know whether other colleges do, but I certainly help out our local schools when they've got data protection queries. There is expertise, and we're in a sector, we're here today because there is expertise in our sector. And that's quite cool. Oh yes, and it's free, which is also good. That appeals to my Yorkshireness. And of course, in our sector, there's very little cross-border transfer of postal information, and that which is cross-border, so that is currently within the EU and negotiated. So Office 365 syndication, for example, is handled through a very nice contract which was agreed between Microsoft and, was it Janet or Jisk? I can't remember. Somebody negotiated something. So all of the Office 365 data that's held through the agreement that we have with Microsoft is held either in Dublin or in Brussels. I keep asking for a field trip to go and see it, but they don't let me. So there we go. So what have we done? So in our little sixth form college in southwest Surrey, we had a data protection officer in place. I already reported to the principal on data protection matters, not because it's legally needed, it's because if there is an issue which could damage our reputation, the principal is the first person to come to me with a big spade, and the keys to the car and directions to the beach. So, that was in place already. The governors, thankfully, the governors have been contacted by some very helpful consultants offering to provide some expertise, which has put the wind up them. So that's helpful. We already had a good data protection policy, and that's because of the breach. And again, between these four walls and anybody watching on the internet, we had a data security breach in 2001, which involved a member of staff accidentally emailing students about special exam arrangements for students with special learning support needs rather than staff. We did handle it. We did avoid a fine, but it was very scary, and I earned my salary that year in about 3 weeks. Unfortunately, it's kind of running out now, so I better do some good work. So the data protection policy came out of that, and the awareness of data protection as an issue, both with our college and our neighbouring colleges, was benefited from that breach, which is why just leak someone else's information if you want to see what happens. It's quite exciting. Our in-house MIS helps. We provide logs of information. We've got logs of information about students. We scan documents, so doctor's certificates. Actually, some of the safeguarding information is scanned. This is so the original documents can be shredded, because I thought they were our weakest area. To break into the college and nick some files is an awful lot easier than coming into the college and nicking some data files. And that means that we don't have student files in our careers office, in our marketing department if there's special things. There's no possibility of a file being taken out of a repository and taken away and then left in a car somewhere. That happened to another neighbouring college of ours. I don't think that went to public, but anyway. And we also have staff, student and parent portals. So there is a mechanism already to expose a lot of information in terms of the data subject. So they know what information we have about them, they can check it, and they can ask for it to be updated. And there's one of the key features about the GDPR is about data maintenance, and that's dead easy because if you email, for example, student email, personal email address, if we tell them that we will confirm their student car parking permits to their personal email address, it's miraculous how quickly we get correct email addresses. So you can do that sort of thing. We do that with writing to parents, saying we're going to email you a code, but we'll send you a letter to the address. You very quickly find out that if addresses are wrong, and you still haven't created a security breach because the information is separated. So there are things you can do, and that sort of all forms part of our culture. And our culture is very much about trying to do the right thing, and that's really what GDPR is, really, isn't it? When it boils down to it, it's trying to do the right thing. And again, like I said at the top, we can't do it. We can't operate as a college unless we have that information. But we already have the culture where if something is outside of that, so for example, we want to take a picture of, take a photo of our sports team who've beaten our local sixth form colleges. Sorry for anyone that's there. Or if someone's done particularly well in an academic sense or done something special. Anyway, in other words, publicity. We deal with that entirely separately from a consent point of view because the student can withdraw that consent, and that's a very specific difference for that type of information, certainly in my mind. Feel free to correct me. So how do we reach this point? The real thing is talking to friends. I mean, I could take our, what was it called? The GDPR Implementation Task Force. I could take myself down the pub, but actually it was probably better to go and talk to other people in other colleges. Our local principals met together. I know somebody mentioned AOC earlier on. The SFCA, the Sixth Form College Association, also has met. The S7 is the group that is a group of sixth form colleges in the south of England that we're a member of. Have talked. And we've created a new data protection group to support this activity as well. And you soon learn who the experts are in that group. And I don't know about anybody else, but I latch onto them and say, help me, please. And of course, we've got this kind of event as well. Common sense. I don't think this is difficult, really. There's nothing complicated. The directive's written in English. It's written in other languages if you choose to exercise your non-English language skills, but I chose to read it in English. The bill is less easy to read, but is still available and easy. Is still available and dead easy to get. And in terms of working out, so that's working out where to be. In terms of working out where you are, I just took a walk around the college. Thought, right, well, what's where? Do I need to panic? The other thing is to get the management on board. We've touched on that already, and I wrote a policy which revised the policy to just get some momentum going. If there's a draft policy on the bill on the agenda for the governors, that's quite a useful incentive to write one. So I'm saying it's all easy. These are the problems that we encountered. There isn't really an expertise in GDPR. What we really need is somebody to fail with the GDPR. Please not Godalming College. But really that's the thing, is we've heard about these fines. There are no fines because there's no GDPR yet. What do we do? There's a lot of hype. Well, we've had hype from, I was in an exams meeting, because with my one-person MIS hat on, I'm also responsible for our A to C implementation. Again, ask me afterwards what that is. So I was with some software suppliers who said, you can't possibly do GDPR, I'm going to contact your principal, you clearly don't understand this. So they contacted the principal came to me and said, what's all this? And I hid under the desk. Here's another interesting thing for us, is there's unclear guidance on data retention. Safeguarding, prevent are two big issues in our sector. Although I'm saying we're not dealing with children, we really are dealing with children, and those children sometimes can be vulnerable and sometimes can be could be affected by things covered by safeguarding legislation. And the guidance about how long you should keep that information varies from until they're 25 for something that happened when they were a child, or the latest one I got the other week was indefinitely. Not quite sure how I'm going to do that one. If there's a member of staff involved in something related to safeguarding, then do I deal with them under the 40-year rule for COSH, or 10 years because that's our policy for information about which staff were here, or things that I keep because of tax reasons. I'm not sure really. I might decide that one over lunch. We need to deal with the subject access. That's something we do need to do. I need to build something that'll work with that. I know some of the software suppliers are already thinking about that as well and offered to sell me one. No, thank you. But another problem we have is this silo mentality. This is education all over. Silo mentality is the department spreadsheet where information about students is handily tucked in with their present, absent, how well they did their homework, and what learning support difficulty did they have. It's quite tricky, really. How do you disentangle that one from the central record? And I'm working on the basis of providing more facilities that are centralised for staff, so that they don't need to store that information, that they can access the bits that they need when they need it, but not when they don't, and when they don't teach those students. Teachers do need information about students, and some of it's quite sensitive information in order to understand how to best teach them, but at the same time that is a risk. And of course, back in the olden days, we used to have filing cabinets. Thankfully, our old principal hated filing cabinets, thought they were aesthetically displeasing, and decided that we would lose them all. So that was quite good. So yeah, I think that's probably, from a compliance point of view, in a big institution, might be the hardest thing. So I'm saying it's easy. Hype. The boss gets worried. Governors get worried. They're working companies. The marketing people contact them. This confusing safeguarding is an issue. Who knows? UCAS references. We deal with, some of you want some of our students. Some of our students want to go to you. Some of their students want to go to you. They all want our references. They all want to know what exam results they got 15 years ago. And actually what we've had to do of late is to say, I'm sorry, we don't know, we haven't got the information on you, we don't know who you are, we can't provide you a reference. And that has implications of its own. How relevant a UCAS reference would be for 10 years on, I don't really know. But hey, there we go. And here's another conundrum that is exercising us as sixth forms, do emails referencing personal information which is stored elsewhere form part of the information record? And I don't know the answer to that one. I read the guidance, thought, no, if it's a replica, it's a copy of something which is held centrally, The live information is held centrally, therefore the email is merely a transport mechanism to get that information from the person from its origin to the person that needs it. However, I did hear that a subject access request from, again, another of our local sixth forms was made by a member of staff. The MIS manager, who also does the ILR, also does the information strategy, but also the data protection officer, asked the ICO for guidance. ICO said, no, you need to supply all that information that's in emails. It was 60,000 emails, and it took the person concerned was off work for 3 weeks with a big black marker redacting opinion, redacting all the stuff that shouldn't be there, and said, never again, I'll resign before I have to do the next one. And there's another curious one, CCTV. It's mentioned specifically in the bill. I can't tell you what it says because the bill confuses me on CCTV. I'll ask Andrew later. Does a recorded CCTV image of some students in a communal area, does that constitute personal information? There are people who say it does, there are people who say it doesn't. I'm hoping it says it doesn't. But once you've identified the people in that image, then it is. So that's the thing. So when our estates manager said, please can we have facial recognition software, I just said no. Better avoid the problem. The dropping of litter is not the problem that we want to have. And the other one, again, this is another one for all of us, is information that's backed up is still personal information. It still needs to be maintained, or at least the fact that it has changed needs to be known. And these days there's the lovely word called the cloud, which again I avoid like rain. Paper and tape, again. So making sure that backup policies support the the data retention policy, I think is quite key, especially for us, where any college will know, or any school will know that if you go up into the loft, you'll find books of information that were stored there for safekeeping. And now it's a historical record and actually has historical validity according to the bill anyway, but you can't keep it, so I'm not quite sure what the middle bit is. Anyway, right, we'll skip over that. Oh yes, and the very final thing on this is that students think they've got a right to erasure. They've heard of erasure. They've heard of Google. They can type right to erasure in Google. Google will tell them that their data can be deleted. Unfortunately, for us, it can't, because we need that information in order to support the educational activity that happened. And that's why there's a distinct difference between the information that we gather under, I suppose, contract with the student, and there's a difference with what we get consent, because the student can withdraw that consent but can't take their data away that easily. So again, I shall just whiz through this because I've said this already. We've read the documentation, drafted the policy, we've revised our notice of fair processing, which was already fairly comprehensive anyway. We wouldn't accept any applications without having the confirmation that they had read it. And none of the data went into our main MIS system until that box had been ticked, hopefully by the student, but hey. And we've worked out who the real experts are in our area. We've had senior management meetings where I've taken the GDPR Implementation Task Force. I've taken all of the GDPR Implementation Task Force at Godalming College into the senior management team office. And we've identified how we're going to delete stuff. And again, having an in-house system makes that quite easy because it's delete from where. And lo and behold, off it goes. And we've identified that we need to create this one-stop shop. Oh yes, training. I should have mentioned this. I get to repeat this to our staff in January. That I've already had requests for leave, which unfortunately one was signed by my boss, so I can't get out to that one. And we're planning a whole college staff activity in person, and we've got online tests planned and that sort of thing. Because we don't want, as was mentioned, that's quite important. And I think that's pretty much all I've got to say about that, in the words of Forrest Gump. Thank you very much.